My sister betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. She slept with my boyfriend and got pregnant. As if that wasn't enough, now my own parents have turned against me, trying to take what's rightfully mine, my inheritance. But they don't know is, I've already set a plan in motion. One they'll never see coming until it's too late. I'm 24 now, but this whole disaster kicked off a couple of years ago. Back then, I was dating this guy I'd met during college. Let's call him Henry. Things took off fast between us. He was sweet, thoughtful, and we shared a lot of common ground. Everything seemed to be going smoothly at first. Honestly, I fell for him hard. I really believed he might be the one I'd end up marrying someday. So after about a year of dating, I figured it was time for him to meet my family. Now, my family's a bit traditional. We come from a pretty conservative background, the kind where people have strong opinions about how relationships should go, who you date, when you get married, all of it. They weren't exactly thrilled when Henry came into the picture. They weren't rude to his face or anything, but I could tell they weren't impressed. They didn't say much, just gave me that quiet, skeptical look, like they were waiting for something to go wrong. I brushed it off, thinking they'd warm up to him eventually. But while my parents stayed cold, my sisters were the opposite. Lauren, who was 22 at the time, and Sophie, who was just 11, both seemed to love him. And honestly, that made me feel good. It felt like at least part of my family approved. Lauren especially seemed to click with him, always joking around and spending time together. We even laughed about how she was stealing my boyfriend. Sophie adored him too, but she was just a little kid, so I didn't think much of it. Henry and I didn't live together. Our culture really frowns on that unless you're married. We worked in different cities and met up whenever we could, but I truly thought things were solid. I trusted him completely. I mean, why wouldn't I? He got along with the people who mattered most to me. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, about 3 months after he met my family, things went off the rails. I was spending the weekend at his place. Nothing unusual, just a chill day with takeout, a movie, the usual. He got up to take a shower, and that's when his phone started buzzing. Now, I'm not someone who snoops through phones. I've always believed that trust means not needing to do that. But that day, something felt off. His phone buzzed again, and I don't even know why, but I picked it up. Maybe deep down I already knew. Or maybe I was just curious. Either way, I unlocked it and saw a message from Lauren. At first, I didn't think anything of it. She's my sister, after all. But when I tapped into the conversation, my stomach dropped. The messages weren't innocent. They were flirty. Full on, let's hook up, kind of flirty. I felt like I was going to throw up. My sister. My boyfriend. I started scrolling, and it just kept getting worse. There were months of this stuff, late-night chats, jokes I'd never heard, secret plans to meet behind my back. I couldn't believe what I was reading. How long had this been going on? The two people I trusted most. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots. I couldn't think straight, but I knew I needed proof. I sent the screenshots to myself, grabbed my things, and walked out of his place without a word. I didn't wait for him to get out of the shower. I didn't want to hear any excuses or lies. I just left. When I got back home, my phone lit up with calls and texts from Henry. He must have realized I'd seen something. I ignored them all. I couldn't even look at the screen without wanting to scream. Eventually, I dumped everything, every screenshot, into our group chat with mutual friends and blocked him. I didn't care about the consequences. I was done. I had no room left in my life for liars and backstabbers. But what shattered me the most wasn't Henry. It was Lauren. Henry's betrayal stung, sure, but Lauren. That broke something inside me. She wasn't just my sister, we were best friends growing up. With our parents always preoccupied with their own lives, Lauren and I had always leaned on each other. We were just 2 years apart and always had each other's backs, or so I thought. The next morning, I couldn't sit with the pain any longer. I packed a bag and flew home to confront her. I didn't care if I caused a scene. This wasn't some petty argument. It felt like my whole life had collapsed. When I got to my parents' house, Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I slammed the screenshots down in front of her. My parents were both in the room. Lauren didn't even flinch. She looked at the messages, shrugged, and said, "Yeah, I did it." So what? Like it meant nothing. Like she hadn't just destroyed years of sisterhood. That's when my mom snapped. She slapped Lauren, something I'd never seen her do. My dad was furious too. He shouted at her, told her to get out, and gave her a week to leave the house. I thought that was it. I thought the worst was over. But 2 days later, Lauren dropped another bomb. She was pregnant. With Henry's baby. I stood there in shock. I couldn't even process it. It felt like things had gone from painful to absolutely surreal. My parents, who were so furious just days earlier, suddenly went soft. All that anger disappeared the moment they heard she was having a baby. And just like that, everything shifted. Lauren wasn't the villain anymore. She was the pregnant daughter, and somehow, that made her untouchable. After Lauren dropped the pregnancy news, my parents did a complete 180. Suddenly, they were talking about how they couldn't just abandon her now, how they had to support her no matter what mistakes she'd made. And that's when I snapped. I laid it all out. Told them exactly what I thought, how they were enabling her, how none of this was okay, and how backwards their thinking was. They tried to calm me down, said I was being dramatic, told me I needed to take a breath, but I was done listening. I grabbed my bag, told them to lose my number, and walked out. I blocked everyone except Sophie. She was still just a kid, and no matter how angry I was, I couldn't bring myself to cut her off too. 2 weeks went by, and somehow my mom managed to get a hold of a new number. She used it to send me a wedding invitation. Yep, Henry and Lauren were getting married. And the cherry on top. She actually had the nerve to talk about family unity, and how I should be there to support Lauren. I told her where she could stick her invitation and blocked her again. That's how the real mess started. I thought I'd already lived through the worst of it, but turns out, the drama was just getting warmed up. After cutting everyone off, I really thought I'd finally get some peace. I wasn't talking to anyone except for Sophie, and I was focused on rebuilding my life. Trying to move forward. But if you've ever had a family like mine, you know peace doesn't last long. About 2 months after I'd shut everyone out, I started hearing little things through the grapevine. A cousin I still talked to casually mentioned that my parents were throwing Lauren a baby shower. Apparently, it wasn't just a small get-together, it was a full-blown event. At first, I just rolled my eyes. Of course they'd throw her a big party. They were acting like she was the poor, misunderstood one in all this. But then my cousin told me something that made my blood boil. She said my parents were telling people that I had abandoned the family. That Lauren was the one trying to hold everyone together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had flipped the whole story. Somehow, the sister who betrayed me was now being painted as the hero, and I was the villain. I wanted to call my mom right then and there and rip into her, but I stopped myself. I knew better than to get dragged back into their drama. So I stayed quiet, but inside, I was raging. A few days later, Sophie texted me just to check in. She gave me a little update about what was going on back home, and then dropped something else that left me speechless. She said my mom had been going around telling people I needed to hurry up and get married. Not out of love or concern, just because she didn't want people gossiping about how Lauren, the younger sister, was getting married and having a baby before me. Seriously? I hadn't spoken to them in months, and now they were stressing about my image. That's just how my mom operates. Everything's about how things look to other people. She didn't care that Lauren had betrayed me. That wasn't the real issue for her. No, her problem was how it might look if I didn't get married soon. I wasn't living by her timeline, and that somehow made me an embarrassment. It made me furious. But more than that, it broke my heart. It didn't matter what I did. I was never going to be enough for them. Even after I cut ties, they still found ways to twist the story and make me out to be the one in the wrong. Fast forward a bit, Lauren's wedding happened. Of course, I didn't go. But my cousin filled me in. Apparently, it was some over-the-top, picture-perfect event. My parents spared no expense, even though Lauren was only a few months pregnant. They told everyone it was just them being responsible, getting married early so the baby wouldn't be born out of wedlock. They even lied and told guests I couldn't make it because of work commitments. Sure. That tracks. But what really got to me? It wasn't just the lies. It was the fact that they were still clinging to this fantasy that everything in our family was just fine. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't completely destroyed our relationship. Instead of facing the truth, they put on this fake show for everyone else and erased me from the picture completely. I was done with them, really. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. So I buried myself in work. Focused on my career. Tried to build a life that felt like mine again. For a while, it worked. Things were quiet. I wasn't hearing much from anyone, and I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, they'd finally left me alone. Of course, I should have known better. One night, my phone rang. It was late, and I was getting ready for bed. But something about the way it rang gave me a bad feeling. It was Sophie. She was crying. Like full on, couldn't breathe sobbing. It took her a while to get the words out, but eventually she told me, our dad had died. I didn't even know how to react. Our relationship hadn't been great, but still, he was my father. But the part that made me furious? Sophie was the one who had to tell me. Not my mom. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing from her. Sophie said he'd been sick for a while. My mom knew. And she chose not to tell me. Said she didn't want to stress me out. Can you believe that? My father was dying and they didn't think I deserved to know. That did it for me. The next morning, I booked a flight back home. All the past drama didn't matter anymore. I just wanted to be there for Sophie. But the second I walked into that house, it felt like I'd stepped into a war zone. My mom and Lauren were there, and before I could even say a word, they both started yelling. The moment I walked in, they went off on me. They accused me of only showing up because of the inheritance, like the only reason I'd come back was for a payday. Lauren, in particular, was vicious. She called me selfish, claimed I'd abandoned the family when they needed me most. There was no room left for grief. Nobody even talked about Dad. All they could focus on was the money, who got what, who deserved more. It was disgusting. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the will was read. To everyone's shock, including mine, Dad had left me the biggest share of his estate. I honestly didn't see that coming, not after everything that had happened between us. But there it was, plain as day, I was getting 40%, Sophie 30%, Mom 20%, and Lauren, just 10%. You'd think I'd feel vindicated or something. Like, finally, some acknowledgement. But it didn't feel good. It just lit the fuse. Lauren and her husband completely lost it. They started shouting, saying I didn't deserve anything. According to them, Lauren needed the money more because she had a baby on the way. They even threatened to drag me into court if I didn't hand over my share. I knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but still, the fact that they were even willing to go there showed exactly what kind of people they'd become. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about fairness. It was about greed. Pure and simple. I stood my ground. I told them I wasn't giving up a single dime. That's when the threat started. Lauren's husband got in my face and said I'd regret it if I didn't cooperate. I knew it was probably just empty talk, but it still got under my skin. I was already grieving my father, and now I had to deal with this insanity on top of it. It was overwhelming. After the whole drama, I went back to my hotel to clear my head. I just needed space to breathe. I sat there thinking about everything, the betrayal, the lies, the way money had turned my family into strangers. That's when it really hit me, I wasn't going to let them keep controlling me. Not anymore. I'd spent too many years being silent, letting them call the shots. That was over. After the whole inheritance mess, I honestly didn't think it could get any worse. They'd already accused me of being money hungry, and Lauren and her husband were doing everything they could to pressure me. But I wasn't backing down. Not after everything they'd put me through. I had every right to what Dad left me, and I wasn't about to let them bully me into giving it up. A few days later, I got a call from my lawyer. We had a meeting lined up to go over the rest of the estate stuff. I didn't want to drag it out, I just wanted to wrap everything up and get on with my life. But when I got to his office, he hit me with something I didn't see coming. He handed me an envelope and said my dad had written me a letter before he passed. Told me he'd been holding on to it until the right time. I sat there staring at it, unsure if I even wanted to open it. I had a lot of complicated feelings about my dad. Sure, he left me the largest share, but he also never stood up for me during the whole Henry and Lauren disaster. I was still angry. And at the same time, I missed him. It's weird how both can exist at once. Eventually, I opened the envelope. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs, but the words hit deep. He apologized. Said he knew he should have done more, should have defended me when everything fell apart. He wrote that he felt trapped between my mom and Lauren, and he regretted how things had ended between us. Reading it, I didn't know what to feel. Part of me felt a little bit of peace. Another part of me was angry he waited until after he was gone to say all this. I would have given anything to hear those words while he was still alive. The lawyer and I finished going over the paperwork, but my head was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't stop thinking about how different things might have been if Dad had just stood up for me when it mattered. But that ship had sailed. On my way back to the hotel, I got a call from Sophie. She was upset, said Lauren had been spreading lies about me all over town. Telling people I was trying to steal the inheritance and pit the family against her. Classic Lauren, always playing the victim, always twisting the story to make herself look like the innocent one. It didn't shock me, but it still hurt. After everything, she was still out there trying to ruin my name. When I got back to the hotel, I decided I needed a break. Sophie was caught in the middle of all this, and it wasn't fair to her. So I picked her up and took her out to dinner. We talked through everything. I did my best to reassure her that none of this was her fault. She didn't ask to be part of this mess. She was just a kid trying to make sense of a broken family. But just when I thought maybe I could start to breathe again, the next day brought a new wave of chaos. I woke up to a ton of missed calls and texts, all from random numbers. At first, I figured it was just spam. But then I started reading the messages. They were filled with threats. People calling me names, accusing me of tearing the family apart. One even said I'd pay for what I'd done if I didn't back off. I didn't know exactly who was behind it, but I had a pretty strong hunch. Lauren's husband had already threatened me once, and this felt like something he'd try to pull. I sent everything to my lawyer just to be safe, but I was officially spooked. Family drama is one thing. Getting threats from strangers. That's a whole new level. Later that day, I went out to my car, and all 4 of my tires had been slashed. Every single one. That's when the fear really set in. I stood there staring at the shredded rubber, heart pounding, wondering how far these people were willing to go. I knew Lauren and her husband were angry, but this? This was something else. It felt like there were no limits to how far they'd go just to get their hands on that money. I ended up calling the police and filing a report about the tire slashing, but I didn't really expect much to come from it. Still, I wasn't about to let them scare me into silence. I already had enough on my plate without being afraid to walk outside. I talked to the hotel management, and thankfully, they agreed to step up security around the building. That gave me a little peace of mind, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. A few days later, we had another sit-down with the lawyer to finalize some estate paperwork. Lauren and her husband were there too, and the tension in the room. You could slice it with a knife. They didn't say a word to me, but the looks they gave me were more than enough. As the meeting wrapped up, Lauren's husband pulled me aside. He told me, again, that I was making a huge mistake by holding on to my share. He said I'd regret it, that this wasn't over. I didn't even give him the satisfaction of a response. I just turned and walked away. I wasn't about to let that man intimidate me into giving up what was rightfully mine. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't the last I'd hear from them. They weren't done. Not by a long shot. That night, I sat down and really thought through everything: my dad's death, the lies, the threats, the vandalism. I was drained. All I wanted was to put this behind me, move on with my life, and leave all the toxic chaos in the past. But as long as Lauren and her husband were involved, I knew I couldn't truly breathe easy. Still, I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd already come too far, taken too many hits, to just roll over now. Let them threaten all they want, I wasn't budging. This was my future, my inheritance, and I was done letting them push me around. If they thought I'd break under pressure, they were in for a nasty surprise. Things didn't settle down after that meeting. If anything, it all escalated. Lauren and her husband were getting more unhinged by the day. It honestly felt like I was living in a bad thriller movie. The threats kept coming, the anonymous messages didn't stop, and I was mentally running on fumes. About a week after the tire incident, Sophie and I were heading back to the hotel after grabbing dinner. She'd been staying with me for a few days, and honestly, having her there was the only thing keeping me grounded. We were walking through the lobby when I spotted this guy just standing there, watching us. At first, I figured he was just waiting for someone. But as we passed, he turned and started following us. I tried to stay calm, but my nerves were already fried. We got into the elevator and as the doors shut, I turned to Sophie. "Did you see that guy?" I asked. She nodded, her face pale. "Yeah. He was definitely watching us." When we got to the room, I called the front desk immediately. Reported the guy. They said they'd check the cameras and have someone patrol the floor, but it didn't do much to ease my mind. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound had me jumping out of bed, convinced someone was at the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren's husband was behind it. Who else would go to these extremes just to mess with me? The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him everything: the guy in the lobby, the threats, the slashed tires. He listened carefully, then said it was time to take real action. He recommended filing for a restraining order. It wasn't a move I wanted to make, but at that point, I didn't feel like I had a choice. We filed the paperwork the very next day. I kept my head down while we waited for the court date, but naturally, the news didn't sit well with Lauren and her husband. The threats kicked back into high gear. Now they were sending even more aggressive messages, saying I'd pay for this, that I'd regret everything. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was exhausted, sure, but I was also done being afraid. When the day of the court hearing finally came, I showed up with my lawyer, ready for whatever was about to happen. And of course, Lauren and her husband were there too. They sat across the room, smug as ever, like the whole thing was some big joke to them. I avoided looking at them. Just focused on my lawyer and the paperwork. But I could feel their eyes on me the entire time. When the judge called us up, Lauren's husband tried to flip the script, said I was blowing everything out of proportion, that I was just bitter about the will and trying to ruin his life. I wanted to laugh. The guy threatens me, vandalizes my car, sends creepy messages, and I'm the problem. Thankfully, the judge didn't buy a word of it. After hearing both sides, they granted the restraining order. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't a total fix, but it was something, a legal line in the sand. Of course, that didn't make everything magically better. The threats didn't stop immediately, and I still found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder. But at least now, I had the law backing me up. That gave me a little peace of mind. A few weeks went by, and slowly, things started to settle. I was still staying at the hotel, but I'd begun looking for a new apartment, somewhere I could finally feel safe again. Sophie had gone back home, and I missed having her around, but we stayed in touch every day. Sophie was still carrying the weight of all the family chaos, but at least she wasn't right in the middle of it the way I was. Then one morning, I woke up to a message from a number I didn't recognize. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a link. I hesitated before opening it, something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be good. And I was right. The second it loaded, I felt sick. Someone had built an entire website dedicated to tearing me down. I'm talking full-on character assassination, twisted stories, half-truths, and straight-up lies. They were painting me as some heartless, money-hungry monster who'd torn the family apart. There were even pictures of me from my dad's funeral, captioned to make me look cold and emotionless. It was insane. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. This wasn't petty gossip anymore, this was calculated, public humiliation. I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the link. He told me to take screenshots of everything, which I did, and we got the ball rolling to have the site taken down. It was just another reminder that Lauren and her husband weren't going to let this go. They were determined to ruin me. But honestly, I was so emotionally fried at that point, I couldn't even find the energy to be shocked. I just wanted all of it to be over. Later that night, I called Sophie. She'd already seen the website and was furious. She wanted to help, but there wasn't much she could do, and I didn't want her dragged in any deeper than she already was. We talked for a while. She told me Lauren was walking around acting like nothing had happened, like none of this was her fault. Same old Lauren. Always playing the victim, never taking responsibility for the destruction she leaves behind. I went to bed feeling emotionally wiped out, but at least I had a game plan. The site was being taken down, the restraining order was in place, and I had legal backup. I wasn't fighting this alone, even if it felt that way sometimes. The next morning, I got an email from my lawyer, confirmation that the website had officially been removed. It was a small win, but after everything I'd been through, I'd take it. It felt like I'd finally wrestled back a little control. As I sat in my hotel room with a coffee in hand, staring out the window, it hit me, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was still mad, furious, actually, but the fear that had been sitting heavy on my chest for weeks had finally started to lift. They could come at me all they wanted. I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. After the restraining order win, I let myself believe things were calming down. I really thought maybe, just maybe, they were done. But clearly, I underestimated just how deep their obsession ran. It started about 2 weeks after court. I was finally starting to breathe again, thinking about leaving the hotel and finding a real place to live. A fresh start. Something stable. But then something weird happened. One morning, the front desk called up and told me I had a package. No return address. Just a plain box. That should have been my first red flag. I opened it, thinking maybe it was a delivery mistake or something minor. But inside was this old, battered notebook. I flipped it open, figuring it was trash. What I found made my blood run cold. The whole thing, every single page, was filled with handwritten notes about me. Pages of scribbled thoughts and timelines. Stuff about my family, my whereabouts, even private details from my dad's will. Some pages listed dates, places I'd been, who I was with, even spots Sophie and I had visited. Someone had been keeping track of me. Closely. For a while. It felt like something out of a true crime show. I couldn't breathe. My first thought was, is this Lauren's husband again? I mean, the threats, the slashed tires, the creepy texts, it lined up. But this? This was more intense. More personal. I called my lawyer right away and sent him photos of every page. He was freaked out too and told me to get the police involved immediately. So I did. The cops came, took the notebook as evidence, but I didn't hold out much hope. I knew they had bigger cases to handle, and I doubted they'd be able to trace it back any time soon. After that, I started laying low. Barely left my room unless I absolutely had to. I was trying to keep my head down, but the anxiety just kept building. Sophie called me every day to check in. She was worried sick, and honestly, so was I. She didn't know who could be behind it, but like me, her first guess was Lauren's husband. Then one night, I got back from grabbing takeout and saw something that made my skin crawl. That same guy, the one who'd followed Sophie and me in the hotel weeks ago, was back. He was leaning near the elevators, staring at his phone like he was just waiting for someone, but it was obvious. He was watching me. My heart started racing, but I kept my cool. Walked past like I didn't see him, even though I could feel his eyes following me all the way down the hall. The second I got into my room, I locked the door and called hotel security. Again. They said they'd check the cameras and have someone sweep the floor, but I was past the point of feeling safe. I called Sophie right after. She was scared, and that made me even more anxious. I hated that she was caught up in this nightmare. She didn't ask for any of this, but here she was, stuck in the fallout of Lauren's chaos. I promised her I'd be extra careful and we agreed to meet the next day to figure out our next steps together. The next day, I met up with Sophie at a little cafe downtown, far away from the hotel. We sat there for a couple hours, just talking, catching up, decompressing, trying to make sense of everything. She filled me in on what had been going on back at home with Lauren. Apparently, Lauren was still acting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just tried to drag me into court over our father's will. It was infuriating, but not surprising. Then Sophie hit me with something I wasn't ready for. She said Lauren's husband had been asking around, trying to find out where I was staying. That was it. That was the missing piece. Everything clicked, the guy in the hotel, the notebook full of creepy notes, the constant feeling of being watched. They were tracking me. Watching me. Probably planning something worse. I knew right then that I couldn't stay at the hotel another night. It wasn't safe anymore. If Lauren's husband had people following me, it was only a matter of time before they showed up again, maybe with something more than just threats. That night, I packed up all my stuff and checked out without saying a word to anyone. Not even Sophie. I didn't want her getting dragged into anything else or accidentally leaking where I was. I booked a room at another hotel on the complete opposite side of town. Something low-key, off the radar. I hoped that'd throw them off for a bit. And for a couple days, it seemed to work. No creepy messages. No strange calls. No mysterious guys hanging around the lobby. But I wasn't about to relax, not with the way things had been going. Then, out of nowhere, my lawyer called. And what he told me absolutely floored me. Lauren's husband had been arrested. Apparently, he'd gotten caught trying to break into my old hotel room. Yeah, you heard that right. I don't know what he planned to do, and honestly, I don't want to know. Whatever it was, the police got to him before he could follow through. I felt this mix of emotions, relief, obviously, but also rage. How had it come to this? Who goes to those lengths over money? It was beyond insane. The police told me I'd probably have to testify once things moved forward in court, but at least I could finally breathe. For the first time in months, I felt like I might actually be safe. After that, things started to settle. Slowly. The police kept me in the loop, and my lawyer was confident Lauren's husband wouldn't be bothering anyone for a long time, not with the charges he was up against. A few weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. Quiet neighborhood. No one knew where I was, not even Sophie. I trusted her completely, but I just didn't want to take any chances. We still talked all the time, of course. She was the only family I really had left. It's been a few months since then. I'd love to sit here and say things are back to normal, but honestly, I don't think they ever will be. There's still this little part of me that stays alert, checking over my shoulder, wondering if Lauren or someone else she knows is going to show up again. That kind of fear doesn't just vanish overnight. But I'm trying. Trying to rebuild. Trying to move forward. Trying to find some kind of peace after all the chaos they put me through. When I look back at everything, what started as a betrayal between a sister and a boyfriend spiraling into courtrooms, restraining orders, and full-on harassment, I almost can't believe it's real. But if there's one thing I've learned through it all, it's this: I'm tougher than I ever gave myself credit for. And no matter what happens next, no one's ever going to take advantage of me again.